few years ago, I was driving through the Canadian countryside where I lived at the time in Ontario, and I was listening to the CBC, which is like Canadian public radio, and there was an interview on with this author in a live setting in front of a live audience, and her voice and her commentary on culture and her insights and her thoughts just drew me in, and I thought I should read a book by this person. And I looked at some books by her at the time, and they were like 450, 500 pages long. And so because of that alone, I kind of put it on the back burner. Sometimes I'm a quantity over quality reader, I guess. And finally, though, this past couple weeks, I read a book by Zadie Smith at long last, and it's a book called Swing Time. It's a novel. And I had the same experience as I was reading Swing Time that I had a couple weeks ago when I read Hang the Moon by Jeanette Walls. And that is that as I was reading this novel, because I read almost 0 novels last year. And so my brain just hasn't been clicked into the fiction mode. And in both cases, I found when I was about halfway done with the book, I just had this realization that I was more drawn in and engaged halfway through the book. Like I felt invested and interested. And I guess that's a good thing. It says something good about the book. So Swing Time follows the story of a young woman. She's never named in the book, so we don't know her name. It follows her childhood and her adulthood. The two storylines kind of go parallel. It jumps back and forth. But by the end, since the childhood story is moving faster, it catches up with the adulthood storyline. And it starts when she's maybe 7 years old or something. She's in a dance class. Her mother is black. Her father is white. It takes place in England. Her mother is a kind of a political activist, very ambitious intellectually, which is connected to the fact that she's not really a very nurturing mother. Her father, on the other hand, is nurturing and loving, but kind of, unmotivated and like the kind of absolute opposite of her mother. But she has a friend across the street in another apartment block where they live, named Tracy, and Tracy has a similar story. She lives only with her mother. Her father is gone. Tracy has all kinds of fantasies about her father. She tells lies about how, he's a backup dancer for Michael Jackson. This is in the 1980s. And Tracy, unlike our main character, Tracy is sort of pampered by her mother, treated like a princess. Everybody loves Tracy. She's beautiful. She's a star. She's good at dancing. She gets everything she wants. She gets everybody's attention. And so even as these two girls grow up and go separate ways, Tracy goes to dance school, goes towards the theater, which has the envy of our main character in a certain sense because she grew up loving the old musicals and movies and things like that. So they're connected, but they're so different, so they're an interesting foil for each other. Anyway, our main character, when she grows up, she gets a job at sort of a media promotion company or something like that, which sort of inadvertently leads to her being hired as an assistant of a big pop star named Amy. And so the adult storyline follows her relationship with Amy and kind of being drawn in by Amy's potent intensity and maybe sort of delusion. I mean, as a pop star, Amy has all the sort of reality distortion of things around her, just making things happen according to her will. And part of this, anyway, I'm rambling on, but part of this is Amy decides to build a school for women, or a school for girls in West Africa. And so part of our main character's job then becomes going to that village, going back to New York, going to that village. So there's a lot of movement and kind of travel and interesting things. But What I found about the book that made me sort of resonate with it and like it a lot was not so much the adult storyline with her working for this pop star Amy, although that, had some drama and interest, but it was more her experience through adolescence and, college age, early adulthood, kind of grappling with the confusion of where she came from, lower income, black mother, white father, where does she belong? And, my story is not at all the same as hers, but it made me think a lot about my childhood because I grew up in the Philippines, and as you may be able to tell, I'm not Filipino myself. I come from a mostly white family. And so when you are kind of between cultures like that, they refer to you, there's a term being a third culture kid, because growing up in the Philippines, I'm obviously not one of the people who are around me. Then coming back to the United States where I went to high school, then I'm not really one of the people around me either. And so you kind of look for and wonder how you fit in and look for where you fit in. And you've missed so much of the cultural landscape that frames everybody's mental world in school, and you're just kind of an outsider, which wasn't overly painful. I had a pretty good high school experience, but reading this book, even though it was a work of fiction of somebody who grew up in England and had a very different experience with me, as I read it, I just thought so much about my own life. And I think that's kind of a gift when a book can do that for you. Coming back and trying to break into, well, everybody does sports, but you haven't done sports growing up, from early childhood. So you can't jump into that world when you start in high school. You can't be on the basketball team or whatever. And where the main character in the book then found herself was with the goth crowd, even though she grew up, sort of passionate about old Hollywood musicals and stuff like that. When she got to be 14, 15, 16, she had this kind of, she was in this morose state of mind. The world was dark, and she just gravitated towards the other people who were outsiders. And it reminded me of my childhood experience going to these, going downtown and going to these sort of heavy metal shows with all these kids who were dressed in, black and everything like that, and kind of manifesting their pain on the outside with how they dressed and how they felt like outsiders. And then on the flip side, back home in my own room, I would be listening to, old music, stuff from the 60s, Simon and Garfunkel, even some musicals and stuff like that. So I related to the main character in some interesting ways, huge differences, but interesting ways. I'm going to read you a little screenshot. I don't have the book because I read it on the Libby app, so I don't have the physical copy here. But I'm going to read you a little screenshot that I took. It said, this is her in that kind of high school age, 14 years old, I think. She said, in that huge game of musical chairs, I turned round one day and found I had no place to sit. At a loss, I became a goth. It was where people who had nowhere else to go ended up. Goths were already a minority, and I joined the oddest chapter, a small group of only 5 kids. One was from Romania and had a club foot. Another was Japanese. Black goths were rare, but not unprecedented. I'd seen a few of them hanging around Camden, and now copied them as best I could, dusting my face ghost white and painting my lips blood red, letting my hair half dread and spraying some parts of it purple. I bought a pair of Doc Martens and covered them in Tipp-Exed anarchy symbols, like when you take a Sharpie and put the anarchy symbol on your, Converse or Doc Martens. I was 14. The world was pain. I was in love with my Japanese friend. He was in love with the fragile blonde in our circle who had scars all up her arms and looked like a broken cat left out in the rain. She couldn't love anybody. That's the period of the protagonist, the main character's life that I kind of resonated with, and it just brought back a lot of memories, good, bad, neutral. Anyway, I find fiction, well, I'm not going to pontificate on, it's an interesting vehicle for making us reflective, and I guess in that case the book is recommended. All right, that's all I'm going to say. See you later.